I've been lucky enough to have ridden my bike in some amazing places around the world, but I suddenly realised that I have some equally amazing places right here on my doorstep that for many years I've been taking for granted. On this ride I'll be cycling around the Hampshire-West Sussex border on roads that are all less than 20 kilometres from my actual front door. Along the way I'll be visiting the ghost village of Idsworth, climbing Harting Hill to see a monument to a failed US state before heading down to Hayling Island to visit the grave of a Russian princess. It's a rather foggy March morning, so I better use some lights. Being hit by a motorist because they didn't see me might just spoil the day somewhat. I head out of Horndean, the village where I live, and straight away I'm on a very quiet country lane heading towards the hamlet of Idsworth. Today there's very little here. It's literally just a few houses and a very picturesque little church on a hill in the middle of a field, but back in the 11th century it would have been surrounded by a village. When the village was hit by the Black Death in the 15th century, it was quickly abandoned, and the buildings and all traces of 500 years of human habitation dating back to the Romans soon disappeared. Inside the church today you can see some fine examples of medieval wall paintings, including one of St. Herbert, to whom the church is dedicated, helping what appears to be a werewolf, but it may just be a hermit on a pilgrimage walking on all fours. Heading out of Idsworth, I make a right turn and start climbing what Strava calls Compton Down. I first rode up here many years ago with one of my cycling chums who told me it was called Bevis's Thumb, and since then the name has stuck. Shortly after crossing the border into West Sussex, I have the chalk down on my right. Bevis's Thumb is actually the name of a Neolithic long barrow or burial mound dating back about 6,000 years to the 4th millennium BC. It's hidden away just off the road about halfway up the climb and got its name from a local legend about a giant called Bevis who could eat a whole ox and drink 2 hogsheads of beer a week. Nowadays around here that would seem like a pretty normal Friday night out. The climb itself is one of my favourites as it's fairly long and steep enough to give you quite a workout. As you can imagine, it's precisely for these reasons that it's very popular with many other local cyclists, especially at weekends. Made the mistake of going out without a helmet liner today, and now when I'm on the climbs and I start sweating, it's all going in my eyes, which is a real pain. Once over the down, I make a left turn and start climbing again up Harting Hill. There are 3 roads up to the top, Chilgrove Chute and the really difficult, massively steep short one up from Harting Village. I'm on the Compton one, which in my opinion is the easiest, as again it's quite long and not as steep as the other 2. During the summer there is probably a sportive ride almost every weekend around here, and nearly all of them will use one of these 3 ascents. So that's the hard part of today's ride over and done with. We're at the highest point on top of Harting Hill on the South Downs, and it should be downhill all the way to Hayling Island from here. Back in 1994, the Tour de France used these roads too, but unlike me, they chose the more difficult route up from Harting, which to this day I personally have never quite managed.
Well, the race today has absolutely flown around the Hampshire and Sussex countryside. They're way up on their original schedule. They're about 8 minutes ahead of their best time expected today. And just look at this little climb. I know this climb very well. It really is a hard one. Well known by club cyclists in Hampshire and Sussex as they cheer the four climbers up it coming out of South Harting. We're heading now off towards Rowland Castle. They're about 22 kilometres from the finish. 22 miles, I beg your pardon, from the finish. And that is going to take them now around about 50 minutes at the speed they're going.
From here, I turn back on myself and start riding back towards Compton. About 100 metres or so down the road is Uppark House, a 17th century stately home now owned by the National Trust. If I'd taken the road up from Chilgrove, I'd have had a very good view of the ruin of the Vandalian Tower in the grounds of the house. Built in 1772, the tower celebrated the founding of the US colony of Vandalia and the proposed state of West Sylvania. But when the War of Independence was lost, remember I'm British, the new American government had other plans and the area became part of Pennsylvania, Indiana, West Virginia and Kentucky. From Uppark, I continue down the hill to Compton Village, which is a very popular spot with local cyclists due to the tea shop. Continuing along, the road flattens out for a while before descending into the small town of Westbourne. Up until recently, this place was reasonably unknown, but its profile was raised back in 2015 when astronaut Tim Peake, who grew up in the town, spent time on the International Space Station. Shortly after leaving Westbourne, I cross the border back into Hampshire and I'm soon in the town of Havant, where I have to deal with a series of traffic lights and roundabouts before making my way through Langston and over the bridge and onto Hayling Island proper. Once on the other side, I make a left turn and head through Northney, where I stop at St Peter's Church, which is the final resting place of Princess Katerina Alexandrovna Yurevskaya, who was the daughter of Tsar Alexander II of Russia. After the assassination of her father when she was 3, she went to live in France with her mother, brother and sister. For a while she earned a living as a professional singer before settling on Hayling in 1932, coming here for its climate as a remedy for her asthma. She ended her days in a nursing home on the island, passing away at the age of 79. From here it's a short ride to the southern tip of the island. Hayling is basically an upside down T-shape, and I'm making my way along the right hand branch to get to the newly refurbished Inn on the Beach.
Journey's end, and now for refreshments by the sea.
So here's my first view of the sea on today's ride. About 10 kilometres to the right, hidden in the fog, is the Isle of Wight, and 100 kilometres or so further on is the French coast, but that's a whole other set of rides for another day.